Hey leaders, welcome back to another episode of the Living Leaders podcast, where today I am joined by the one and only Paul D. Lowe. Paul is the founder and president of World Game Changers. Paul is a leader who is seeking to reshape the narratives that define who we are. He's had quite a colorful and challenging story, very difficult upbringing, has managed to heal a lot of trauma. And he's very open about this in his podcast, the World Game Changers podcast. But he's gotten to a point where he as a leader has really been able to alchemize the challenge that life dealt him and has been able to heal not only his heart, but his mindset and the stories that he tells himself. Paul is a leader who doesn't shy away from owning that he is leading from love first. Love is what drives him. I think it's no coincidence that his last name, Lowe, is just one letter away from being love, because this man is on a journey to shine more love into the world. He understands that the vision that each person holds in their heart, the positive impact that they want to create in their communities, in their relationships, all of this comes from love. He understands the connection between love and purpose, and that we as humans, at our core, we are love. We are capable of healing and shining our light, shining our purpose out into the world. And yes, it is a journey. Yes, it can be hard at times. In today's episode, Paul and I get into all of that. We explore the relationship that leaders can have with change, with the unknown, with fear itself. Can fear be a teacher? Can the unknown be a supportive guiding force that invites us into something better than we could have ever imagined? Can our authenticity be a lighthouse, as Paul puts it in the episode, that invites like-hearted other lighthouses to find us? Inside the episode, we get into what it means to be a heart-centered leader or a heart-driven leader. We talk about the power of intention over planning and how heart-first leaders often start with an intention and form enough self-awareness and enough trust to be in loving relationship with change itself, with the unknown, with fear, with the mind that so desperately wants to attach itself to a secure plan or specific outcomes. The mind often wants the journey to be really clean, clear, linear. And yet the human experience, with all of the emotional elements, the spiritual elements, relational complexities, is often not linear. We talk about the importance of being fully present in the now and letting go of our attachment to what's coming or what was or who we think we are supposed to be. We explore themes of perfectionism, comparison, expectation, and how these societal pressures might hold us in a mold and prevent us from being our truly authentic, vulnerable self. We talk about the power of relationships and building pathways of trust across other change makers, other vision holders, and the importance of creating unstructured, non-agended time and space to mix and mingle with those who share our vision or who are different from us. After this conversation with Paul, I'm leaving with an even deeper understanding of the power of leading from love, of the role that learning plays in our leadership as well, in the way that letting go of attachment and being in a state of play or imagination is where some of the most profound ideas come from anyway. And it's in this space, in this state of being, where we often experience the greatest levels of synchronicity, coincidence, and serendipity that we have in our whole lives. As you listen to the conversation with Paul and I today, I invite you to explore within yourself, what does being a heart-centered leader mean to you? How might you lead your life and your work with even more love? And what might that create for you? What might that open up for you in terms of how you're wanting to live your purpose, leave your legacy, positively impact the people around you? This conversation with Paul is incredibly rich and authentic. May this conversation give you whatever you are needing today and in this moment on your leadership journey. I'm so grateful that you're here with us. Without further ado, let's dive in. I am joined today by Paul Lowe, and I could not be more excited to have you on the Living Leaders podcast. Finally, it feels like it's been a long time coming. So thanks for being here, Paul, and for having me on your show so many times.
Absolute pleasure, Nicole. It seems, although you say, it seems like a long time. Every time we get together, I mean, bearing in mind we've only known each other 5 minutes, but it seems to
It sure
span
does, doesn't
and
it?
defy this concept called time.
And isn't that the beauty of finding those souls, those other fellow humans who share a mission, share a value set, share a vision for what they're creating? It's, I think, knowing what you're up to over at the World Game Changers Network, and just through conversation getting to learn who you are, the values that you embody, all of that interconnectedness across the visions that we both seem to hold, that has just allowed this level of dropping in that does feel timeless and does feel like we've known each other longer than we actually have. So thanks for naming that timeless time that we've created.
Yeah. It's and I think we, and feel and actually know that we're in a space, a new paradigm of energy that where, and I've used this is my own take on it, this word blessed, that higher power, source, universe, God, call it what you will, is bringing souls together to co-create now. And it does make it seamless, and time becomes irrelevant, like you've alluded to, Nicole, in our dance, as I call it. It feels like a sacred relationship that's been there from the off. And the fact that it's only, I don't even know, what is it? I don't know, 3 months, 2 months, I don't know. And, care even less. But it's timeless. It's timeless. And I think that really speaks and aligns with this kind of new paradigm that continues to emerge, this different energy, this different seamlessness, and you know how I love to flirt with this word coincidence of, oh, that's a really good connection. I'm glad that I've, met with him or her.
Right.
What a great coincidence.
It makes me curious to look up the definition or the Latin roots of that word, even coincidence. It's quite, there's quite an intelligence, even I would call it. And I'm so glad you used the word emergence, because this has been on my mind a lot lately. I find myself in a place where not only am I trying to grow multiple organizations at the same time, but I'm also working with clients and helping them do that. And there is this thing called strategic planning that we tend to do when we start businesses or prepare them to grow. And there's some beautiful practice in there, right? Of realigning with the mission, asking, is this still the mission that we're holding in our hearts? Are these still the guiding values and principles that we hold? We try to do things like predict financials and do financial projections, and all of this can create clarity and coherence in a group, I believe, and maybe even a sense of safety or security. I think we're often looking for that which grounds us, connects us, de-risks the process or the path. And yet, I really believe in the intelligence of emergence. And if we are too beholden to a rigid plan, it's almost as if we're living in the past when we created that plan, or living in some future that we're trying to hold on to, and we might be missing what is right in front of us, the person that's right in front of us, the opportunity, the shifting sands or the shifting tides of our context. And to me, it feels like when we are present, when we are embodied, there's this attunement in the present moment that we get to have with our context and inside of our relationships. And this honestly is where I find not only the most magic and coincidence and all of this, but it's like like, this is where it really is. This is where purpose exists. This is where life unfolding is. And I don't want to miss it. I don't want to miss it by living in the past or in the future. And so I would, as a fellow leader, as a fellow founder of an organization, I would just love to hear your take on emergence, strategic planning. How are you going about this over at World Game Changers?
Wow. So planning, interesting word. I mean, I kind of go on record now as saying I don't plan. I set intentions. And somebody said to me, that's quite a loose and flimsy and, you know, it's a bit kind of non-committal. Maybe. But what about if we set intentions to go in a certain direction? And what about if around that intentionality, we then devised strategies and then we took some action? And this is the most important part that experience has taught me in life in general, and
Yes.
certainly in business and entrepreneurship. Then let it all go. Let it all go, because it's out of your hands anyway. And I think the more we buy into that kind of, I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate here and say fear-driven need to control, that need for certainty, because this is on my plan. Oh, is it really? And I think it's like any other journey. Let's take a journey in a car, for example. Going from one major city to another. We plan our route, and we know we allow 2 hours for it, 3 hours for it, whatever. But we don't allow for the inevitable of an accident or the car breaks down. We get too attached to the outcome, and that's where, for me, intentionality trumps planning. So my planning is actually all of the above. That's it. And there's a paradox in there because I don't actually plan. I set intentions. I devise strategies, which, includes obviously the common sense, dare I say common sense of, okay, well, who's on this? Who shares the vision? Who shares the values? And that in itself is a great letting go exercise. Just by kind of that self-talk, Nicole, of who shares this with me? Or is this just about me, myself, and I? And if it's the latter,
Yeah. Yeah, certainly.
can
Yeah,
be very
so much of
problematic.
this happens through the power of relationships and alignment. And when you were talking about, aligning around these values, aligning around the vision, building strategy together that supports the intention, not the rigid plan, but the intention. I love that distinction. And when I hear you say strategy, it's as if I'm also hearing the word agreements, like intentional agreements across the people on the team of what do we think we're going to do if
Yeah.
one of us steps down as co-founder, or if the media spins this in a negative direction. Like, to have even the word contingencies might be fear-based in a way. It might make us feel better or feel more secure. And so if we want to go through those exercises,
Mm.
sure thing. I don't think there's too much harm in that, so long as it doesn't take over our attention for too long. But I think in the building of strategy and creating structure to hold the intention, to hold the vision with love, with agreement across the connections between the people, it's like that's so much of the how that I'm operating in these days in this new paradigm. And you can't do that without relationships. And you can't build those relationships without really seeing the person who sits in front of you. And I think that requires things like presence, asking meaningful questions, patience, finding the common ground, even across our differences. I mean, the list goes on, right, of the conditions that would create the best environment for a relationship to form in a way that creativity then gets to flow, and in a way that shared vision gets to spark, and then we're really in the dance. I love that you call it a dance, because it feels that way to co-create with someone and to get into that rare headspace, heart space where you both see it, you both feel it, what it is that you're trying to ground into reality. And in a way, I've come to think that that's all the de-risking and all the planning that I need, is to know that that's there, to cultivate it, and then trust it, which is what I am hearing and what you're saying around. Then let it go, let it go. We can trust it. We can trust our ability to be present with one another.
Yeah, yeah, because it'll land where it'll land. But from my experience, that's in the general area of the initial intention. Might not be the exact nth degree, but it'll be in that general area,
Right.
or not. And if it's the latter, then that's fine, because it was never meant to be. But we get so attached to things in our head, don't we? Where the ego takes over, and yeah, but I've done this and I've done that and I've done the other. Well, okay, but at what cost? And that's certainly, as a leader, a lesson that I've learned over the years, to the power of letting go. I can remember one of my former mentors, a guy called Jim Britt, who was actually Jim Rohn's business partner for many years, and also Tony Robbins' mentor for many years. And I can remember having a conversation with Jim Britt one day, and we was talking about life and philosophy, and he said to me, "What do you think, Paul, are the most important 3 words used throughout the world, the most significant?" And I jumped straight in and said those immortal words, "I love you." And Jim quipped, "Oh, thank you, Paul. It's a long time since another guy's told me that." And as all kind of good mentors does, he anchored the point, and he wouldn't give me the answer. What seemed like a lifetime was probably only around 30, 40 seconds. But, and this was all ego. And this, I look back on it now and smile at the ego related nature of it, because one, I jumped straight in with a conditioned answer of "I love you." And then when that wasn't, it became apparent it wasn't, and Jim wasn't going to give it me immediately, my ego wanted it immediately. I wanted to control the outcome. And so, the wily old fox that Jim was at the time, and I'm sure still is, bless him, he kept me hanging on. And then before he delivered those 3 immortal words of "let it go." But I mean, it didn't hit me straight away, Nicole. But, as those kind of, as the years have passed on that, boy, are they poignant words. Because with the reality is, we've got no control over it. We think we have. We might set intentionality, or we might set goals, or what have you, to raise £1 million for our business. Okay, that objective might be achieved. But when we look at, for me, the bigger dance of, bringing the goals together, but more importantly, and I'll use this term, happy. Am I happy in my life? Am I feeling really, do I know with a big, massive capital K that I am where I'm supposed to be in my life? And the fact that I may or may not have $1 million in the bank, or I may or may not have all, the expected things that a guy or a girl of a certain age is expected to have. And we've got to be obviously very wary of that word, and that trap of expectation, as we have with the perfection as well. These are all traps, in my humble opinion. But just to let go of that and say, actually, I feel so whole and connected that money, if you want to just single out the money element, I've got so much inner peace.
Absolutely.
That I'm a
There are
multi-trillionaire.
many forms of wealth, many forms of currency that we get to give and receive. And I think with so much focus on money, it can be easy to forget that. And I'm so glad you mentioned the perfectionism, the expectation, these things that sort of hold us from some external source, whether it's society, the expectation of our parents, the roles we think we have to play inside of relationships, inside of companies, whatever it might be. I think if we peel back some of the layers within the expectation, and I'll just speak for myself, there's a lot that comes up around comparison. comparison and competition and shouldism, and looking externally and seeing, gosh, if someone is running their business that way, if they are fundraising that way and getting these results or these outcomes, whether it's financial or otherwise, shouldn't I be doing that too? And if I don't, am I a failure in some way? And so there's that negative self-talk of comparison and not being good enough that can show up. And when that gets in the driver's seat and starts choosing for me, right? It starts choosing the actions that I take, the tasks that I put on my to-do list, even, because now maybe I'm looking outside for the answers on the strategies I should use for marketing or for sales or for social media. And that it's like that comparison game then fills my to-do list. It's those to-dos, those actions were not born from within first. They weren't born from this intention. And I think that's an interesting game that we get to play with ourselves, almost, of moving slow enough, moving intentionally enough to notice, where is this action coming from? Where is this drive coming from? And why do I want that? Why do I want that outcome, or to hit that KPI or whatever it is? And if the answer is anything other than because it is true for me, because it is in full alignment with how I want to express or the vision that I want to create, then we do need to leave space and give ourselves permission to let things go. And I love that this mentor was so clear in that. Let it go. Let it go. And this has been one of those lessons that I've had to learn the hard way many times, because when my to-do list gets full of should-isms and have-tos and obligation and expectation and all this, I mean, it becomes a pressure cooker. I know now that my low back pain is a signal that I'm in the pressure cooker. I'm holding myself to someone else's standard, and I'm trying to fit myself in a mold that isn't for me when my low back starts to kick in. And so that is now a body signal that I've learned. But I never used to let any of it go. If I said yes to it, I felt obligated to complete it. If I noticed a shouldism that came from anywhere, I would add it to my list and, diligently at my own expense, make sure that I still did the thing. And so I have a practice of, on my Kanban board or my Kanban board, which is how I manage my tasks, I actually have a let go column next to my done column. As I'm moving tasks through the Kanban board, if something no longer feels right, something in me has shifted, something in my context has shifted, it's this physical reminder, because I have it on my wall, these columns with all my Post-its, and I'll give myself permission to put it in the let it go column. Sometimes I need to be with it for a second because I'm sad that I'm letting it go. Other times it is this huge wave of relief that creates so much space within me that now I have room to do or be something else that's more aligned. So lots of wisdom in what you shared. And I just wanted to reflect some of that back and share some of the ways that the letting it go has really, really served. And putting it into our practices and our operational ways can be a good reminder. At least that's been one way that I try not to forget this very important lesson.
Mm. Yeah, interesting word, reminder. And, of the comparison element, that for me is part of a trio of what I call the three deadly C's: criticism, comparison, complaint. And whenever we find ourselves in any one of those three aspects, it's, okay, how come I've ended up here? I'm off track. I'm diluting my energy. I'm throwing my energy away like confetti. And I've found that over the years, there are three
That's
great litmus
incredible. I
tests
love
to
I love
self-check.
that. And the alliteration, right, helps with the reminding, the rewiring of our brain until that second nature. And I'm curious, do you have any other clues or litmus tests that you use to discern, am I am I setting the intention or choosing the action from alignment and source, or am I choosing it from ego and fear? Or how do you distinguish where these inspired actions or intentions are coming from?
First of all, I don't get too hung up about it. It's, I suppose, to use the metaphor of dancing, I just get on the floor and dance. And it naturally presents whether the ego's getting the upper hand because, I don't know, metaphorically, another guy's come on the floor and he's trying to outdance me. Oh, okay, I'll show him, to use that metaphor. But there's these kind of, I think you know intuitively, and that is for me. I can remember having a conversation with a very eminent practitioner based in California, and this young lady asked him, do we ever get to a time or place where we are sorted? And, the old anchoring thing of, he anchored it in yet again for about 30 seconds, and we was all kind of with bated breath waiting for his response, believing there to be some kind of utopia. We get to this place where we're so elevated that, mere mortals' lives,
Right. We've
brackets
made it.
human beings, doesn't affect us anymore. We're way beyond that. And we've made it. Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, after about, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds, and he said, no, but we learn to catch things quicker, which then brings in that self-awareness, that self-observation. So I don't know if that answers the question, Nicole, but for me, it's that self-observation, being grounded in that. What am I saying now? Having almost that kind of ability to, even as we speak, what am I saying? Why am I saying this? And if I say something that, the ego's kind of escaped for a little bit too long, it's to acknowledge that and say, do you know what, Nicole, I'm sorry about that. I got a little bit carried away there. I'm playing with it rather than should have, would have, could have. And then that starts playing havoc with the mind. This beautiful mechanism up here, I call it my little friend. And play with it. Oftentimes I'll go on my podcast when I'm hosting and I'll introduce the guest and I'll get completely tongue-tied, but it doesn't matter. And people say, well, you're going to edit that out. No. The team could edit it out, but it's allowing ourselves, isn't it? And it brings in that
Yeah.
almost forgiveness of, do you know what? I've got it wrong, have I? But who cares? It doesn't matter. So it's this kind of dance we have with ourselves and, playfulness with the inner child and, flirting with ourselves. And, I use the example, which is true, and I'll look in the mirror when I'm having a shave and I'll say, do you know what, Paul? You are one handsome young boy. You really are. And one day some young girl's going to be really fortunate, and literally kind of playing and having
Right.
that fun with it
Right.
rather than, oh,
Right.
there's
And
a
now
grey
you're
hair
in
come there.
the
Oh dear, what
worry
am I
or
going to
or
do
the
now?
criticism, to reference one of the three C's. So it's almost flipping that into compassion that we can have with
Yeah,
ourselves. And I love the playfulness element that you brought into that answer too. And just do it. Like, just get out there and try it. You don't have to get it right. You don't have to get it perfect. Just start dancing and see what
yeah,
happens. Give yourself permission and be kind to yourself to see what happens. See how you do, see what you notice. And if it's okay if you mess up or miss the steps or make a fool of yourself, or whatever the fear is that we have about just getting out there and putting ourselves out there, to really let that go. So I love that. Yeah.
yeah. Because the reality is nobody really cares. Nobody cares, but we build this thing up in our own mind that, oh, must
Hmm.
do, would have, could have, should have, and all this, got to do this. And it's a trap. And it just creates more inner fear rather than that, kick off your
Yeah.
shoes and learn to kiss the sun and touch the moon. Just play with it, enjoy it. Because for me, it's wrapped up in the stories we tell ourselves. We can, I had a name for myself in um, a self-proclaimed name when I was going through my
Hmm.
struggles, which lasted decades, and I called myself Shufflefoot. That was my nickname. self-proclaimed shufflefoot. Imagine a character with shoulders bowed, head down, shuffling along. Poor old me. Why does this always happen to me? Oh, that kind of thing. And I was shuffling along. And then I kind of had this eureka of, but what if I told myself a story? I
Right.
was Superman instead. Because both are stories. You may as well choose one over the other, one that's more self-empowering. And it all comes back, to answer your previous question, to that self-observation. Where am I at this moment in time? And being honest with, to thine own self, be true, be loyal to yourself. And then by being loyal to yourself, what I've found, Nicole, and obviously there's going to be people that don't align, don't like that, feel threatened by it, or whatever. Fine, that's okay. Because I've found through solitude that so long as you're true to yourself, it's not a bad place to be. It's a very peaceful place to be. And that shines outward then and attracts the right people. The blessed nature of those relationships that you, in my humble opinion, rightly alluded to at the top of this dance. The right people for the right reasons. Why? Because it's come from a greater source for a sole purpose, which we may not understand at the time. And that's okay, because that then brings in the word faith, but trust. Just trust that you're on the right path with this person for whatever reason. Of course, the ego is going to kick back. Yeah, but. I love the yes, buts. Yeah, but. And you don't understand, Nicole, because you haven't got, I don't know, 6 mortgages, 5,000 cats, 4,000 kids, whatever.
Yeah,
So you don't understand, all these
we
kind of
do. We do.
self-justifications that
And
we
the
create as part of
power
our
of stories
story.
to hold us in a reality, in what we think is real, how we see ourselves. I couldn't agree more with you. This idea or this concept around the first relationship to prioritize and to heal is often the relationship that we have to ourselves. And I notice even in the language that you use that you seem to have developed this very loving relationship with self, calling the mind my little friend and doing the work to be with your inner child, or looking in the mirror and saying kind things rather than self-critical things. These can be seen as such micro moments throughout a day, but every single one is an opportunity to rewrite the story and rewrite what we tell ourselves, and therefore build a new relationship with ourselves. And once we have that relationship running internally, that's when the externally aligned starts to show up big time, at least in my experience. And that it comes back to what you said in the beginning around coincidence, synchronicity, serendipity. There are many labels for this thing of things coming to us, right? With ease, with delight and surprise. Even sometimes these things that show up in life when I'm aligned, I'll often laugh and I'll be like, you can't make this up. I never would have known that I was even asking for this, but this is just perfect, hysterical. Usually I find that the universe seems to have quite a sense of humor, and I enjoy that dance with the universe as well. Of like, wow, I couldn't have made this up. This is just too wild. And yet we find each other,
Yeah,
the aligned souls with these shared missions. We really find each other, but I think it's dependent on our ability to see ourselves, to your point, our ability to tap into our intuition. And to me, that means body sentience in a way, to not be only living in the head, but to be living in our hearts and in our bodies enough that we know what it feels like. There's so much intelligence, so much biological intelligence that intuition seems to have, just in how my gut, right, will say yes or no. And our ability to really listen to that and not get caught in all the other stories and all the other gripes and fears that are pining for our attention. I mean, at first that it's hard to let that go. It takes work and practice, but I think at some point it becomes more of the primary or dominant way of being. And as I look back on my journey, I can almost palpably see the transition of leaving the old paradigm or a culture that was rooted in ego, in comparison, and all of this. And of course, multi-step process, and I'm always learning. We're never there. We don't get there, to your point. But there was a shift where I do feel like I'm now spending more of my time, or majority percentage of my time, in this new way of being. And I have to say, it feels really darn good. My health is better. My relationships are better. Or it's, yeah, just quite a shift compared to what I was indoctrinated into in culture, in business school. And that's, I often reference that on this show, of the things we learned in business school versus the things that life then teaches us to unlearn. And that's a process. That's a real process. So I would love to maybe kick that question over to you around, what did you have to unlearn to now be hanging out in this state of being? Because you strike me as someone who also hangs out in that space a lot.
Yeah, let me kind of work
Mm,
that in reverse order. So let me offer an analogy of going on a journey. And yet again, let's use a car as an example. So it is wrapped up in the stories that we tell ourselves. So imagine going in a car, and I embrace the thought, the energy that's attached to having a convertible, the sunroof's down, driving along the freeway, just cruising along. Beautiful. But of course, life's not like that, because sooner or later we'll come off the main highway and we'll come into a side road where we have to drop the speed down, and the weather might change, and then we have to put the sunroof back up. And then as we go down a country lane, up an hill, or what have you, there might be a tree that's been strewn all over the road and we have to take a detour. And so, for me, it's about these, and I've said it before, but these stories we tell ourselves, being a creative storyteller, embracing our beautiful friend up here to help us along, rather than, at the risk of splitting metaphors, don't let the tail wag the dog. And I think so many of us, and I speak
mm,
for myself in this respect, have regarded in the past as the mind as the dog. And we, as the person, become the tail. So we then, as the person, do what the mind tells us. And it's about
mhm.
taking that control back. And I'm very wary of that word, control. But having that awareness, that self-observation of, no, I am the metaphoric dog. This beautiful little friend
Yeah.
up here is the tail. And just kind of flipping it 180. But to then go back to the other example of being in a car, and it's okay for us to give ourselves permission to change gears within the car. And sometimes we have to change routes, and that's okay. And you know what? It's okay for us to actually put the car in reverse every now and again and go backwards, because that's what we need to do. But we're not conditioned. There's this kind of ideology of best case scenario, the sun shining, etc. And just to finish off that particular journey metaphor, what would happen if we spent all our time looking in the rearview mirror on our journey? We'd crash. So why do we expect different results when we live so much
Yeah,
in the past and
absolutely.
don't focus on
It,
the here and now?
these journeys, these journeys are almost never a straight line, and they almost never unfold exactly how we may have imagined when we first got in the car, right? But it's that relationship to the unexpected, and allowing the unexpected or the unknown to almost be a teacher and a friend. I'm sort of noticing this theme in the language you use around befriending these things that have once challenged us or caused us to be afraid, befriending the mind, befriending
Mm,
the unknown, befriending the change that inevitably comes when we do have to take a detour or stop to refuel, or we're called to arrive a couple days later than planned because we just saw this beautiful meadow or whatever it is, and we want to go rest or play with our friends, and that's okay too. It's so to let go of the attachment to the outcome, to let go of the perfection of the linear journey, or the myth, really, the myth of the linear journey. Because even inside, so every year we take between 120 and 150 executives from around the world through essentially a 3-month program container. And it's all about sustainability leadership. We look at how to be regenerative as people, how to prime the cultures of our organizations to be more receptive to idea flow and to really tap into our creativity, build pathways of trust across other change makers in organizations. There's this whole way of being, and we get a lot of our inspiration from nature and biomimicry and from indigenous knowledge systems. But one of the things that we talk about very, very early on in the program is exactly what you've just named. That we actually show an image to the executives of a straight line at the top of the slide, and it's like, here's what we thought the journey was going to be. Here was the plan. Here's the plan we had. Looked very linear, very neat, tidy, clean. But just underneath that, there's this squiggle that goes every which way, and we label that the actual journey. And then underneath that, there's another straight line, and we call that the official story or the official narrative. So that's the story that our marketing teams or PR might put out there that makes it to the outside look like a very neat and tidy, planned, safe, secure, predictable journey. And I'm sure our shareholders love that, right? The reputation that we might get from that could feed the ego a little bit and give us that false sense of control. But this phenomenon of the brain thinking, oh, this is going to be easier, I think it's going to take about a week, the actual journey being very different, and then getting asked about, well, how did you do that? How did you travel through that journey? It is almost without words sometimes to even describe what the squiggle actually was. And so we say, oh, well, I hit some bumps in the road, but made it. And here we are. And so there's this element of authenticity and nuance and vulnerability that we seem to be missing in telling the story of the squiggle and sharing that, okay, you experienced that too, huh? Things are not perfectly planned for you either. It's not just me who's a mess or who is disorganized or chaotic. This is sort of the nature of starting any quest and being in that great relationship with the unknown and the unpredictable, but then allowing it to actually make it better than we ever imagined, make it better than we thought. And so I often try to be in that relationship to change and the unknown these days. And I'm curious, as as the founder and as someone who's leading this incredible community of world game changers. These are all like-hearted individuals. I got the chance to meet some of them for the 600th episode celebration that you all just had. And I could just see how wonderful these humans were. And so my question to you is, as change makers, what might our relationship to change and the unknown be? How do we tell stories about the squiggle that let the unknown be okay?
Is it too simplistic just to say, with our beautiful friend up here, okay, you're such a key part of my life. Please wag your tail now and create squiggles and take me where you're going to take me. There's kind of no coincidence, Nicole, that the books that's been produced, the anthologies, almost 20 now, of just creating that space for people to express, to be creative, to go where they want to go without constraint, without expectation. But we're not conditioned to do that, are we? We're not conditioned. So it's almost like peeling back the onion layers that, as we come in as a child, dare I say, pure as a blank piece of paper, and as the metaphoric scribbles that, or how that paper gets populated over the years through experience, and then we undo all that, we unlearn all that, and we keep peeling back these layers of the onion, which makes us cry, because it's like it's playing with the expectation, it's playing with the conditioning, it's playing with the ego. And I think to quote a term from John Major, the British Prime Minister of the 80s, it's getting back to basics. Just let's get back to basics and the simplicity of love. And this relationship with fear, there's a lot of, I think, talk about this polarization at love at one end of the scale and fear at the other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be an either or. That's part of our narrative. Why? Why has it got to be either or? Where did we learn that from? I suppose the
Right.
terminology like you win or you lose. Why? Well, who's to say what winning and losing is? We give it reference, we give it meaning. But it's freeing yourself from that prison, that metaphoric goldfish bowl of, I'm a spirit. I'm a spirit. And I'm the spirit of love. And, I say that, and this is why, Nicole, I love to use words like flirt and dance when I speak about love. And I say that because the energy that's attached to those words is so much more uplifting for me personally. What it means to other people, well, they'll filter that and what it means to them. I'm only responsible for me and my journey, to shine the best I can, to exude that energy of love. And if it resonates with a person through dialogue, through non-verbal communication, whatever it is, fine. And if it doesn't, that's fine. I love the Anne Lamott quote. Lighthouses don't go chasing over oceans looking for ships to save. They just stand there and shine. And I think that's part of our responsibility as a human. Just stand there and shine. But that starts with us, doesn't it? We've got to get our own lighthouse in order. And then when, everything's plugged in and the bulbs have been changed, we just radiate that light and that warmth. And that's kind of it, really. And that's come from a very simple choice I made to go back to you answering your question years ago. I'm trapped in this fear, this victimhood around these stories, these experiences that are controlling me. And I came across this polarization concept of love versus fear. And that was at a time of my life where things were either or. You can only have one. And this was from a culture from a very early age of you win at all costs. Never take any prisoners. You win at all costs. I mean, that caused me a lot of problems. A lot of problems. But then letting go, to come back to those three immortal words, let it go, of surrendering to love. And when people say, well, particularly the more masculine energies, I'm from my past. Well, Paul, have you gone a bit soft these days? You talk about love and you talk about forgiveness. Yeah. Because when you compare it to the alternative of being embroiled with fear and control and manipulation, it's a one-horse race. So you judge me if you think I'm weak and soft. That's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm okay. It doesn't matter what you think of me. More importantly, it's how bright is my lighthouse. That's all that really matters. That's my responsibility. And I believe, and I've come to know, Nicole, that the more you have that self-observation and the more you invest in that inwards energy, the more you will attract people to then actually help you on your way. And it becomes then a dance rather than one person on the metaphoric dance floor. All of a sudden, you've got several partners that you're interchanging with, exchanging energy. Motion creates emotion. And all of a sudden, the place is full with beautiful music. The vibrations increase.
A lot more light.
The world becomes a better place.
It is. Yeah. But I think sometimes the
It's quite
most
simple, really.
profound things are. The most profound things tend to be the most simple, I find. And this move towards simplicity, love, getting back to basics. I really appreciated the way that you named that as well. I was imagining the simplicity of coming together around a meal together, or cooking a meal together, getting outside and going for a walk, sitting down and having a conversation or a quote unquote meeting that doesn't have an agenda, that lets people just show up from exactly where they are, share out where they are, and you just kind of see where it goes, see where it flows. There's, maybe sometimes if we have deadlines or things, we might feel like, oh, I don't have time for that. But I often think and experience that when I slow down and I get present with other people and gather in simple, very human ways, that's when the profound insights come. That's when the deep relationship is formed. And now we're in a dance of reciprocity, abundance, generosity, where it might be that during that unstructured conversation, that unplanned, unstructured conversation, I created such a connection with someone that they're now wanting to introduce me to the right person, or wanting to meet me to go speak on XYZ stage. And that takes me down this other path, this other detour that ends up being really right. And so we just don't always know. We can't plan for what is emergently or organically going to happen. But if we can be receptive, be open, do the inner work to be the lighthouse and just shine, if that's really our primary job, then the rest does seem to fall into place. And this is, yeah, again, I'll use that word reminder again. What a good reminder that I don't have to always be in the grind, in the hustle to make things happen. What if there's an easier, more easeful way of doing and producing and still having all these great outcomes, but not doing it at the expense of my health or my truth or my authenticity, my integrity even. There's so much in the way that the world seems to be running in business, in government, that is asking us directly and indirectly to let go of our integrity, to mask our authenticity, to play small, to dim our light. And I don't think we get the outcomes that our hearts truly desire when we do that anyway. So it's like, yeah, it's really, it's a choiceless choice to me. It's like, I believe I have much freedom in what I'm choosing and how I'm choosing to be authentic. But this one just isn't even a choice for me. I can't go back to the old way. I can't sacrifice my integrity or dim my light anymore. It's more painful to go dim my light and play small than it is to take the risk of letting other people see my light. And so game on. I'm going to shine even if it's uncomfortable, even if I get hurt maybe in the process. It's less painful than the alternative.
Yeah. And I think that, to pick up on your terminology there of to get hurt, really, and I offer this as a suggestion rather than a statement, maybe that's just a shifting of where we thought things were at, of our own expectation, of our own conditioning, to actually, we're getting close to the truth. This is the truth. And through those experiences, we raise our awareness, and for me, heightened awareness is our stepping stones towards consciousness, because that's the big blank infinite space that we kind of dance in, isn't it? Consciousness. And I think the more and feel that we're embracing and dancing within that infinite open space of consciousness through awareness raising experiences, which may be perceived as good, bad, or indifferent, that's all they actually are, stepping stones. And it brings us back yet again, let it go. Let it go. Take the learning from it and let it go. And that's
Yeah.
it.
And there's that that attachment piece of letting it go, and how suffering often comes from attachment or expectation. And so the sooner that we can let go of that, maybe, just maybe, some of these difficult times, or the moments where we feel like life is sort of chewing us up, spitting us out, whatever framing or words we want to use there, or we feel like we're getting kicked when we're down, or whatever it is, like telling ourselves the story that it's really hard right now. Maybe, just maybe, we can let go of the attachment to our own suffering as well, and see it as, as a learning, as a litmus test, as insight or wisdom that, oh, that wasn't aligned for me. No wonder it's blowing up in my face, or no wonder that relationship is not working out in the way that I thought. It's not for me. It's not aligned for me. And that's okay. And so I might actually experience less pain and suffer less if I can let go sooner. And so that's one of many insights I'll be taking with me from this conversation, Paul. And as we come to a close, every time that I've come to hang out on the World Game Changers podcast, you seem to always let me have the last word. And so I would love to reciprocate and let you have the last word, to just riff and express anything that you're tapped into in this moment, to offer listeners, or to just express.
Thank you. There's many things. I mean, it's been a fascinating dance, as it always is, Nicole. We could come at this from so many different, perspectives on the dance floor. But I think it's, for me, one of the powerful ones is, and we've already alluded to it, is never underestimate the power of your vision. Where are you going? Where's your intentionality? Where do you aspire? What is it you want out of your life? For me, a lot of my early formative years, I was a great advocate of Dr. Stephen Covey. He's well known, obviously, for his 7 habits of highly effective people. Probably less so for his 8th habit of leave the world a better place than it was when you got here. That's great. So for me, that is part of that. Okay, well, that's a nice fancy philosophy. How are you going to get there? And this is the values. Values, I believe, are really good stepping stones. And my 5 L's, and listeners may take something from this, may not, are life, the most precious gift of all, in all its weird and wonderful forms. Because without life, what is there? There is nothing. So that's the first of the 5 L's. So we've got this gift of life. Well, what are we going to do with it? Why am I here? Why, other than obviously my mother and father, or whatever means I arrived here. But what am I going to do with this gift of life? For me, it's a gift then of learning, going on a voyage of discovery. Now, obviously, learning takes many different forms: vocational, academic, practical, call it what you will. But learning about what? And this is the filling right in the middle of the 5 that sits right in the middle, learning about love, and particularly self-love and self-forgiveness. That's the big one. That's the really big one. Learning about love. I've come from a background of violence, of addiction, and I had that choice to make. I didn't know it was a choice because I was too busy embroiled in victimhood. But once I started to realize that there was a choice to dance with love, to embrace love, to be love, because love is it. And that's part of not my story, but my knowing, which may or may not work for others. So we've got this gift of life. We've been on this voyage of learning about love. Okay, then what do we do with it? We shine, and we create a legacy. Okay, so what's the 5th one? And throughout that whole process, to thine own self be true. In other words, be loyal to yourself. You alluded to it, Nicole, with your authenticity. Be true to yourself.
True.
Because you're not going to please others. Sometimes you're not even going to please yourself, and that's okay. So for me, just to kind of sum it up, and to bring it to a close, it is about never underestimating the power of your vision. Why am I here? What's my purpose? And it doesn't matter how humble that may seem. How it doesn't matter, but make it matter to you. And that's really, and I've used the word a few times, and you have as well, and I think it's very appropriate. Make it as simple as that. Embrace that childlike curiosity and learn to dance with life again.
I'm imagining the mic dropping. Paul, that was wow, what a place to end on. And we'll just let that note reverberate among listeners. And for anyone who wants to learn more about Paul and the World Game Changers, I'll drop links in the show notes so that you can follow along. Check out the World Game Changers podcast, the newsletter they have going over there, the books they're co-writing. It's quite a cool and alive community. So Paul, thank you not only for being here in this conversation, but for the work that you're doing in the world and the way that you're showing up in the world. There's a lot to be appreciated and a lot to be learned from the way that you're showing up. So thanks so much for all that you do. And I know that we'll talk soon, and I'm sure have another dance. Such a pleasure.
My pleasure too, Nicole. Thank you.